Hi, this video is a brief overview of MDAccess. And MDAccess is a multi-dimensional reporting program from Structurally Sound Software Solutions. And the URL for Structurally Sound is sssol.com. And this is the About page for MDAccess. So as I said, MDAccess is a multi-dimensional reporting program. It's a Windows application, and Charted is the web version of the same program in web form, and it reports from database tables and views in a multi-dimensional fashion, as does MDAccess. So this tells you some about MDAccess. Now, there are two versions of, as I said, MDAccess is a Windows application, but it comes in two versions. There's the trial or limited version. It's not a trial version. It's limited in that the number of elements that it can report from and the number of elements that it will allow in an MDA database that it builds. So, and then there's the release version, and the release version is available on the same page. It's purchasable through PayPal, and then we'll send you the password to access the release version. So the link to install the limited version is right here. And so let's go ahead and take a look at that and start that up. So this is the initial menu. Now, there are three options here, and when we don't have any MDA databases, well, let's back up. MDAccess reports from SQL data sources. Now, that data can be in Excel or SQL Server or MDAccess, or excuse me, Access or Oracle. The example we're going to go over, we have the data in Excel, Access, and SQL Server. And here's a look at the data we're going to go over in this example. And it's 1,200 records, and it has 10 areas, 10 brands, and 12 months. And these are the titles for the areas, brands, and months. And then it has an associated column for an area number, a brand number, and a month number if we want to change the order of the titles, the element titles, that is, the brands, areas, and months. For instance, if the months are sorted alphabetically, we would get 1, 1, and then we would get 10, 1. But if we sort them by their number, then we would get them in the order of 1, 2, 3, and then 10 would be 10th, and so forth. And then this last column here is the unit sales, and it's the measure column that we're going to use to show a quantity in our charts, the bar size and the line height and so forth will be determined by the how much of the pie wedge, the size of the pie wedge, and so forth, by the unit sales. We're going to use that as the quantity field. And so we have this table in Excel, and we have it in Access, and it's in this table here, and we have it in SQL Server right here in this database, this table, and then I'll just display the top 1,000 rows, and we'll see that it's the same data. So we can build the MDA databases from any of those data sources. Now, as I said, I don't know if I said that yet, but the MDA database is the multi-dimensional database. And MDAccess can report from that intermediate database, that MDA database, or it can report from the original SQL data source that the MDA database was built from. So, let's go over that again. We have SQL data sources, and in this case we have the same data in Excel, Access, and SQL Server. Now MDAccess can look at that data and build an intermediate database called an MDA database, and then report from that MDA database, and that MDA database is written to disk and left there permanently, so that if you come in tomorrow it'll be there the next day and so forth. Or MDAccess can report from those SQL data sources directly. And when it reports from those SQL data sources directly, at runtime it builds a cube, and then just temporarily. And every time it makes the report, it builds the cube. And the data source is now the SQL data source, as opposed to the intermediate database, the MDA database, that in the original method we talked about was the source data, the data that it was reporting from. So there's those two methods. MDAccess can report from an MDA database, or which is made from a SQL data source, or it can report straight from that original SQL data source. So the two methods, and they are grouped in these two blocks here. It's like if we were to define a new plot. Two methods are: you want to report from an MDA database, either in Access or SQL Server, or do you want to report from a SQL data source? And the reporting from the SQL data source is really this last option here. This option here will create the MDA database from the SQL data source and then report from that MDA database. These two options here assume you already have built an MDA database. This option builds an MDA database and then reports from this that MDA database. This option says we're not going to use an MDA database. We want to report straight from the original SQL data source that these MDA databases would be built from if we were to build them. So that's basically the two methods of reporting in MDAccess, and that's from an MDA database or from the SQL data source that the MDA databases were built from. Which do you want? The MDA database is a cube, and it can have 1 to 7 dimensions. So reporting from an MDA database is limited in the number of dimensions, but it is the values in the cube are now pre-subtotaled. So in that sense, your values are pre-calculated, and you can report from them without having to remake those totals again. Also, in the MDA databases, calculations are available. That is, we could build elements on top of the existing elements in the cube, like sum some of the elements into a new element, and take differences in some of the elements in the cube, and create a new element in the cube based on the values of the other elements in the cube. Okay, that calculation feature is not available when you're reporting straight from the SQL data source. But when you report straight from the SQL data sources, you have all the columns available as dimensions. So you have a lot more capabilities as far as your dimensional, the number of dimensions you can report from. You get all the columns in the table or view that you're reporting from as your dimensions, and then it can build a lot more variability into the cubes. Pre-making the cubes, you have to define the cube up front and then use that cube to report from. So it has fewer dimensions but more flexibility in the dimensions that it has to report from, whereas when you report from straight from the SQL data source, you have more flexibility in the dimensions, but you don't have that calculation feature. So those are the two forms. So in this case, since we're coming into it fresh, we don't have any MDA databases made. So we can close this out here and go to this menu item here and say, let's create new MDA databases from external data sources. That's what we're referring to as SQL data that's not in a cube, an MDA database. Or we could go with this option here, the third one, that says, let's build an MDA database from that SQL data source and then report from that. So that's what we'll do. So this is an informative message that just tells you how to do it. You select the data source, you select the rows you want to create the data table that you're going to create the cube from, and then you select the columns to be the dimensions in the cubes, and the columns to be the measure values, the data values, and you can select attributes if you want to also to the dimensions. So we'll go with that. So we'll start with the Access database, and we have this database out here. Remember, we looked at that data. The data was in here, and it was the same data in Excel, and then it was the same data in SQL Server. So we'll go back here and we'll select that. Now it's looking and saying, okay, I got your database. Now what table do you want to select from? And we'll go out here. We only have one table in there, and it's that ETR table. So we'll select all the columns, and then we'll say okay. Let's say run the script. There's 1,200 rows. Say okay. Now this is now the table that we're going to create our MDA database from, and it's asking us what columns do we want to make have be the dimensions in our cube. So we're going to go with areas, brands, and months, and what is the measure field, that is the data value to show the quantity in our bars and our wedges and our lines. And we're going to go with the unit sales. We could select multiple, but then it would create a measure dimension. Now if we just select one, we have the option of not creating a measure dimension, but in this case we're going to let it go ahead and create a measure dimension. So that'll give us 4 dimensions: areas, brands, months, and measures. And in that measure dimension would be this column, this value, this element. It could have more, but that's not actually a value we want to use. So now, when we can select, don't add any attributes to these dimensions, or we could say look at what's available out there and add those attributes. Now an attribute for a dimensional element is a column that has a consistent value for every unique value. That is, when I say consistent, has a unique value for every unique value in the dimensional column. For instance, if in the areas, if the area was Pittsburgh, and we had a column here that was country, and every row that had the value of Pittsburgh in area had the country of United States, and it was that way for every area. That is, Denver was always Colorado, let's say, and Pittsburgh was always Pennsylvania, and St. Petersburg was always Russia. Okay, so then that would be a qualifying column for an attribute for the area, and that would be the country or the state, and it would say, oh, that column qualifies as an attribute to our dimensional column, and so that would become an attribute to that column. So in this case of months, consistently have each unique value of months has a consistent unique value in the quarters. That is, January is always going to be quarter 1, and June is always going to be quarter 2, so forth. So we don't have to select. We're not selecting that as a dimension. We're saying add all qualifying dimensional attributes. So we'll go with that. So now it's going to build the table. We didn't have to add those attributes if we didn't want to. It's a little more confusion. So we'll go with a default chart type, it made that MDA database, and it opened it up as the selected MDA database, and then these are the dimensions. Now we notice that they're not in the order we want them. They're sorted alphabetically. Oh, we don't want that. No, that's why we had that number out there, the month number. So, and it qualified as an attribute. See, the sort order attributes, the display attributes. These are the attributes. The quarter qualified as a month attribute. So did the month number, and it throws in an ID, and this element type is for calculation to say whether the row is a base element or a calculated element. That is a sum, for instance, a sum of other elements. For instance, later on we're going to try to make calculations of quarters, and they're the sums of the months. But anyway, so we'll say sort it by month, and let's just say here we'll select all and display all the attributes. I'm going to turn the hierarchy on, and we'll turn everything on here. Now this is going to make a folder for each month that only contains the 1 month. So, and there's the 1 month. So we can turn that hierarchy off, and we got the original months. Let's see, I put them in the sort order that we specified, that is the month number, not the month ID, which was the original sort order. And it threw that ID in there when it made the MDA database based on the sort order, the alphabetic sort order of the month title. So 1 was the first one, and 10-1 was the second one, based on the alphabetic sort order of the title. So, but since we have the attribute of the number, put that in there. Now, as far as the hierarchy, we'll turn that back on, but let's say we wanted to sort it by quarters. We could say, I don't want to sort month, no, I want to sort it by quarters. Then it would put those folders in there for the quarters, and so forth. So, now we can do the same thing with the areas. Sort it by month number, and organize the brands by month brand number. Now, here we could say, so we see now that they're ordered in that way. Now, let's look at the brands. We could also organize them differently. Again, here we could say show all attributes. But if we didn't, we'd say we wanted to sort it or organize it by size. And let's turn all these hierarchy features on. And now we see it's sorted by size. And the attribute for these brands was large. The attribute for these brands was medium. And the attribute for these brands was small. We can turn the hierarchy off, and we see that we've got the 10 brands, and they're sorted by their attributes. Sorted by the attribute, or the size attribute. Again, we could say, I don't want to sort it by size, I want to sort it by number, and display it that way. Let's say I don't want to see all this information. We could say unselect all, just show me the name or the title. It's going to ask me if I want the name on there. Say none. Okay, the name is the repeat of the title and how the brand is displayed. So there we have that. Did we select them? No, we'll go through and select all. We'll select the months, and there we go. So now we have all data selected, and we have 120 pages of charts, because we got our brands, 10 brands as our plot pieces. We have the units as our plot group. So we're left with the months and the areas. Remember, we had 10 areas and 12 months. That's 120 charts. Now if we change that layout and we put the months on the plot groups, the basic layout of all the charts in MDAccess is, so let's look at it here in the cube layout, is plot pieces, plot groups, and the pages. And then any other dimensions would default to groups of pages. So since we have measures here and areas is not assigned to any of these attributes, areas are put outside the measures, so we have the groups of pages. And then if we had another dimension, it'd be groups of groups. And so forth. It just keep looping further out. Well, let's put the areas on pages. And that would switch. Now we're stepping through. So we have 10 pages defined here. Now, that we can also, these icons here, show you what database dimension is associated with which plot attribute. This is for plot groups, it's for pages, plot pieces. Or, again, if we want to see it all laid out, pieces, groups, and pages there. So, if we want to put areas on the plot groups and months on the plot pieces, we could do it like that. Now, and so forth. Change measures to the areas. Now, let's say we wanted to change the selections and not look at the whole database as we are in this case, and look at a subset. We can do that. And so we're looking at brands is on our pages, so we put brands on our plot groups. Now, okay, so we're looking at a smaller set, subset of the data. Now we can look at that data in any of these plot types. We could see it as a stack bar, lines, has the same layout in these cases, pies, tabular grid, or the grid, the same data, just the way it's being displayed. And we can change the layout in any of these plots. So let's go back to the vertical parallel bar. Now this is the data displayed in the raw data. Now if we wanted to see the percents, we could say either show me the percent of this data, 7,641, of the total page. That would be percent of page plot. Or we could say, show me the percent of, for each value within its group. So these are about thirds. So if we say the percent in the group, let's put the tabular on top so we can see it displayed there. So they're about thirds. This one is not, it's about 50% here, and it's going to sum up to, if we have a stack bar, it would all be 100 in this case, because we're showing the percents within the group. Now, if we were to show the percent of the page, we get a little different information. Okay, so now we have 10 pages here of plots, area 1 through 10. So we could step through those pages like this. And we can go to the beginning. Or we could say, I want to see this plot as a multi-page plot. Now there are two types of multi-plots. there's multi-plots, which are totally different plot definitions displayed in the same plot form. And then there's a multi-page plot. Multi-page plot is just one definition, but it's showing multiple pages of that definition. So we could turn that on. Well, we could turn it on here also. Here. So now we're seeing the first 4 areas. And so 4 of 10. And if we step to the next 4, it'll show us the next 4. And then it'll show us the last 2. And then if we loop back to the beginning, we looped around back to the first 4. Now we could put a main title on this chart. And a footnote. Now, so that would hold through the 10 pages. So we go to the next page, and the last page, and so we'll go back to the beginning. So this is a multi-page plot. Turn off the multi-pages. Now we went to 10 pages. We're on the 4th of 10, or we could turn that back on. Now that's a multi-page plot. Let's turn this off. Now we could move that plot. Let's turn it back on, and we'll move it, position it, and we'll put it like right here. Okay. Now if we want to have a multi-plot, we could add another plot. And we'll add a definition, and I happen to know there's a definition sitting out here. Definition has with the DEF extension. So now we've got two different plots. This is a multi-plot. And, you know, we could print it. Print preview, and we could look at that and print that. Or we could save it to a save file. Save it to a save file, and we'll say we'll call that a multi-plot. One. And so we could change the layout of that, and we could position them so we have one row and 2 columns of plots, and there it is. So now when we click this plot, we see that this database is open, and all the information displaying is referring to this, describes this plot. That is, we can look at what dimension is on the plot pieces, what dimension is on the plot groups, what dimension is on pages. Look at the layout there. We can select the elements. We see this database has 3 dimensions, and it has 3 elements in each dimension, except this dimension has an aggregation. So we could let's look at that aggregation. Is that a built-in? That's an aggregation here, and that aggregation is the sum of the 3. So we could change that to be something else, but we'll leave aggregations out of it for now. and we'll go with that as is. And now if we click this plot, now it opened up the database that this plot is reporting from. And right here is the database. And that we made, and it has the area, the brand, the months, the measures. And right now months is assigned to the plot groups, and plot pieces is the brands, the individual bars, and here's the legend for the bars, brands, and the pages are the unit sales within areas. Areas is the last outer dimension. It's not assigned, so it defaults to being outside the assigned dimensions. And so the pages loops through the areas, and we got the 10 areas, and therefore the 10 pages. Again, we can turn this multi-page aspect to this particular plot. There's really only two plots defined here. One's this one, and this one reporting from the ABC database. Go back to this one, and now we can turn off the multi-page aspect, and it still can step through the pages of that plot. So that's the difference between multi-plot and multi-page plot. So let's delete this plot. Delete current plot. Yeah. Okay, and we want to size this plot to the full form. And there we go. So, alright, so that's a brief overview of the plot types, or the various plot types, and the multi-plot and the multi-page plot. And we made a save file, so let's say we wanted to go back, and we left, and tomorrow we came in, and we wanted to pick up that save file that we had made of the multi-page or multi-plot, and so we'll go like that. Oh, what am I? Wait. I think I want to save. When I say save, I want to restore. Restore. Okay. Multi-plot one, and there it is. That's what it was when we saved it. We created the save file. All right. Now this is an undo, and it'll step us back to where we were right before the restore, and it'll take us back and so forth. Or we can go forward to. We'll step back to where we want to be right here. Okay, so that's the undo. Now we'll go back and build the another MDA database from the Excel. Select the data source, and look for, there's our data source. Okay, we select all the fields and the script, 1200 rows. We'll make a database. We'll call it that first one we called temp. We'll call this MDA temp 2, and turn on the I'd like to have the words in capitals WAD, the qualifying attributes, and there's a temp2 already out there. Override it. Yeah, go ahead. And so it's making that database, that MDA database, which is the intermediate database, and we got the same database, or a copy, because it was the same data. We can organize it the same way. Organize it by the month number, the areas by the area number, months or brands by brand number, and it goes with the default layout. Let's say we want to put months on our plot groups, we have months on the plot groups. Excuse me. Oh, okay. We're going to select all. We didn't select. Oops. Okay. We want to select all. It's looking at a subset of the data. All right. So now we have the months on the plot groups and the brands on the plot pieces, measures on the pages. We could put the areas on the pages. Since there's only one measure in 10 areas, there's 10 pages, whether we, 10 times 1 or 1 times 10. Either way, we organized it there. If we want to select fewer areas, we would have fewer pages. So we'll go with 5. Now we got 5 pages. Okay. And as we said, we can display that in any of the chart forms. Kind of confusing there. We could look at fewer brands. Say we just want to see 3 brands. Change some of the let's see, if we wanted to appearance piece, line types, go ahead and take off the curve line, could go with that. Okay, so now we made the database from Excel, and we made the database from Access, and now we'll make the database in SQL Server. So we'll do the same thing. Select the data source, SQL Server. Oh, we have to go get our server name and our database name. We got to put that in there. Oops, sorry. Server name and database name. This is the database with that same table. I mean, a table with the same data. And so we'll go in there, put that in there, and we'll select the table, all the fields in that table, run the script, select our dimensions. Now see, we don't have to do this, no, we want to, well, we can put this MDA database out in SQL Server this time, instead of putting it out in Access. Add all qualifying attributes. Now, we wouldn't make an MDA database every time we wanted to make a chart. We would make the MDA database once and then create the charts from that MDA database. Or we could create charts directly from the SQL data source. So here we have the same information in, let's put the brands on the plot group, say. Alright, so that's that. So we reported, we took the SQL source, data source in Excel, and we took it in Access, and we took it in SQL Server, and we made, from each of those, we made an MDA database, and we reported from those MDA databases. Now, we don't have to do that. We can do that. We can now go out and create charts from that MDA database. We could go out here now and pick up the MDA database and say, temp was that one. We could say make a stack bar, and we didn't have that. Let's cancel that. that's not the database that was sorted. We'll alright, this has the elements in the order we want them. Turn the hierarchy off. We want to. There's the months. And we could create charts from that database. And we could, make any kind of chart we want. Let's say unselect all. Just want to see the months. Turn those off. Oh no, we don't want to add the month attribute or the name attribute. It's a repeat of the column that is determined to be the name of the attribute. So of the element. So sorry, we want to go out and select fewer months, say. And make a pie chart. We can put the tabular where we want. If we don't, we can change the font in the plot in these text groups. Text groups are like all the tabular numbers. We could say, I'm going to change the font of all the tabular numbers to an 18. Or we could change them all across the board. We could do that for various groups. Plot group font, we could say I want to see that an 18. Or we could say for all text groups, I want to see an 18. So, or we could change it, to the size we want. Fonts of all text groups at a 10. Let's go back to the 18. We could change the color of those text groups individually, or for all text groups. Turn off the override. The override says, see that this tabular and this plot piece in the legend have the color of the plot piece. The green, see green for brand 2, blue for brand 3. We could turn that off either across the board, or when in this case where we're setting the colors, it's for the legend, but we did select the all text groups. So we want all text groups, say, to be red. We'll say OK. So, we could put other features in there about the colors. Give them a yellow background. Have it gradient shade to white and outline in black. So, okay. Now, again, those were all reporting from the MDA database. Now we can report straight from the original data source if we wanted to. And let's do that in SQL Server. In this case, excuse me, I picked the wrong database. I want the external database. Alright, this is the table. It has the areas. And now we could select the areas we wanted, the brands we wanted, the months we wanted. Select the units and the chart type. Now in this case, we have a bigger selection in the dimensions, because it took all the columns and it didn't build that intermediate cube, that MDA database. So it's going straight from the SQL data source, and I did not select the columns that I want for my dimensions. So it defaults to, okay, I'll take all the columns and I'll present them to you, and you can select the columns you want for your dimensions. So it has more flexibility in that regard, but it has, again, less flexibility in that the cubes are not pre-made, so the subtotals are not pre-made, and also the calculations cannot be done to sum elements into other elements. Not just sum, but take differences or different percent changes. So let's put the areas on the plot pieces, plot pieces, yeah. The plot groups, we'll put the months. But they're not sorted alphabetically. They're sorted alphabetically, so we want to well, we could put the month number. Month number down there. Let's see. So that's reporting with the quarters down there. Subtotals on that. If we go back out to the selections, we could select group, for instance. Well, right now we're saying what we want. If we just want to see area 1, it's just going to report area 1. If we want to see area 2, 3, and 3, we can go out here and select area 1, 2, and 3. So, that is reporting from the SQL data source without the MDA database cube as the intermediary data source that we would be reporting from. So let's look at another a data source that has more data. So we'll close that, and we'll define a new plot from a SQL data source, and we'll look at this database here. This has a list of jets. This table here, jets. Now each row this is a table. Now we could report from tables or views. If we wanted to just see the views, which is the tables linked together into a grid form and then presented as a new table, we could report from that view, that new table created from that linking up of other tables into a grid, and then we could report from that if we wanted to. But in this case, we'll report from the table, the jets. Now, if we want to see the actual data of that jets, well, first let's take a subset here. Okay, let's step back here. These fields here are the columns that exist in this table. And these fields here are the binary columns to get our measures, that we can show the magnitude of the plot piece, the bar and the wedges and the lines. So these columns are summed up, will sum up for instance, the units. We see that units is out here, and age groups right here. So this is all the columns, and these are the binary columns that can be summed to get subtotals, to make the cubes from the columns we've assigned to the dimensions in the plot in the plot attributes. So if we want to select, say, certain years, regions, we could do that. So it's going to get the unique values for the regions and the years. And then let's say we just want to see the current data, and we want to see in Europe. So now we're looking at a subtotal of the records that were out there. And the constraints we put on those records were Europe and 2013 Q3. So now we can do a multi-select on those fields that we've selected. So we could say we can see Europe and other regions or other years if we wanted to. Or we can go out and look at the actual records that we've selected and just report from those records. So we see now we're selecting from 5,900 records. And we could just take a subtotal of those records, and let's say we wanted to organize it and put model on there as another attribute. And let's say we just wanted to see 777 jets. So we would select those. We could do a search here and just say by attributes, and we say I just want to be looking at the 777s. So we see here now that 183 of the rows in this table were found with this value of 777. Or we could look, there's 1,289. This is the full number of rows down here of the subset that we selected, Europe 2013 Q3. And within that subset, it's showing us the number of rows that have this attribute, model 737. If we say, look at year, we see, well, all the rows have this attribute because we've already subset the original data to just be 2013 Q3. Or if we look at the region, we're going to see they're all Europe. All right, let's go back to the models. And so we see that 19 of them have 707s, 24 have 717. So let's say we want to look at the 777s. Say okay, we selected those. We had already done that. So we got 183. Now right now it's saying that we're looking at a subset of 183 rows of the original 5950, which was itself a subset, being Europe 2013 Q3. Anyway, so we selected the 183 records, and so we're reporting from that. But again, if we want the full set, okay, so now we're not selecting individual rows. That was just selecting 183 rows. That's an option that I haven't used a great deal, but that to select a subset of the rows to report from. This is the standard procedure of selecting the rows that we want to see. So let's go with that. And if we want to put the countries on the plot groups, we could do that. And we could put the manufacturer on the plot pieces. If we put the regions on the plot, we know there's only one region, Europe, and we know there's only one plot piece, for the year, that's that quarter, so we got one chart, one bar again. So we want to put the regions here, or let's say manufacturers. And so this is showing the number of jets for this manufacturer in this region in this quarter that are in use. So this is making cubes from the from another data source other than that area brand month data source that we originally started from. So then we moved to a different data source, which was a table of the jets. So anyways, that's a brief overview of MDAccess. And if you have any questions, or if you want to use it, try it on your data, download the trial version, or purchase the purchasable version, the release version, either one, or give us a call, and we'll be happy to talk to you about it. So thanks for listening, and have a great day.